And Sylvia, yes, I think we can start now.
Okay, so good morning. I'm Silvia Campailla and I work for the municipality of Genoa. Genoa is one of the partners of the ELVITEN project. Now I share with you the screen. You can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. ELVITEN is an Horizon 2020 funded project with 21 partners, and the aim of the project is to demonstrate the usefulness of light electrified vehicles for urban transportation and integrate them in the transport system already in place. Our focus is on bicycles, scooters, tricycles, and quadricycles. In the project, there are 6 demonstration cities: Berlin, Bari, Rome, Genova, Tricala, and Malaga. The goal of today's webinar are spread the project experiences in order to share competencies and what partners have done during this month of the project. The cities have experienced the corona crisis virus during the pilot implementation, and we have tackled the problems and found solutions to use the electric vehicles to support, for example, volunteers to make the little distances that were allowed during the lockdown period. And this has provided lots of data and information to us. We'd like also give inputs and information on lessons learned all along of the project that can help planning authorities to propose new mobility models or adapt the existing one. And today we'd like also to give information on what ELVITEN can offer to other subjects interested in join as follower cities. Here there is the agenda. As you can see, there is a time slot at the end for questions and answers. And as we have told before, the webinar is registered and it will be made available later. One of the project objectives is to create a network of cities planning authorities to accelerate the rollout usage of the ELVs in cities and to sustain the transferability of knowledge and experiences in follower cities across Europe. The cities which sign a statement of interest can be follower cities, and then they will receive support from the ELVITEN project partners to establish, construct, or grow electric mobility systems in their cities. ELVITEN partners can give, for example, suggestions, inputs, and tell what are the lessons learned during the project. If you will be a follower city, you can have access to documents and reports, for example, the report on the webinar topic of today. You will have the possibility to organize site visits in the demonstration cities, to take part to the final event, or to participate to the other webinars that will be organized in the future. The statement of interest is a document. Here there is the template with which your city makes clear the interest in ELVITEN project. With this sort of commitment, the city will be inserted in the follower cities of ELVITEN. The statement of interest is for free. And if you like to be a follower cities, I think that we have today with you with us some cities that have not until now signed the statement of interest. But if you want to sign this document, you can contact me or the coordinator, and I send you the document to sign it. Now I think that we can go deep in the webinar topic, and I give the floor to S3T.
Hello, good morning. This is Francisco Leta from S3 Transportation and Iteratory Innovation. During the ELVITEN project, we have been performing the data analysis, so the analysis of the data collected from the vehicles, from the questionnaires during the ELVITEN demonstrations. And since the COVID-19 lockdown and crisis happened during the ELVITEN demonstrations, we were able to collect data and observe what was happening during this period. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen correctly?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Well, we are going to put the ELVITEN project in context. What's happening in the world during this period, the impact that was observed in different areas related to the transport sector, like tourist traffic, public transport, and then we are going to see how it happened during the ELVITEN with the data that we collected from the vehicles, from the telemetry in the vehicles, from the questionnaires, etc. First, during this situation, we see that there have been a big economic impact. The initial forecast that the world GDP was going to contract 5.2%. However, this has proved to be wrong, but because the impact has been even much larger. In France, for example, in the second quarter, the construction in the GDP reached almost 14%. And many developed countries are experimenting a decrease in their GDP between 14, even up to 20% in some cases, for countries that are much more dependent on tourism or services than industry, for example. The impact of tourists has been large during this period, mostly for two reasons, of course, because fear of contagion, and also because of travel restriction imposed that made it almost impossible to travel. So the World Tourism Organization observed 20 to 30% decrease expected in 2020. This may be even bigger than the expected number, because in some cases these expectations were based on the assumption that everything will be going to normal during summer. This has not happened, so this may be even much worse at the end of the year. But we do not have we do not have any data yet. Only expectations and forecasts based on this assumption in most cases. The tourism in Europe is suffering a lot, especially in countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, that are based that they have a very big tourism industry, more than other countries, and we can see here that also Asia Pacific has suffered a lot from the tourism impact. In urban traffic in different cities around the world, we see that because of the lockdown, because the restriction to travel, because many offices and workplaces were closed, and and telework was recommended or sometimes imposed. The road traffic in the cities have decreased on average 75% and up to more than 90%, 93% in some cases. In Milan, Paris, Rome, there has been the largest decrease in road traffic, while in other cities it has gone down to 75%, like in Lisbon or London. But all cities has experimented this decrease in urban traffic volume due to the COVID lockdown. And public transport, we observe also this decrease in all cities during this period because of restrictions and also because of fear of contagion when people are enclosed in public transport, in bus or metro or tramways. So in this graph from MOVIT, Public Transit Index, we can see what has been the impact during this period until August. On e-mobility, on the other side, we observe a different pattern. Since, of course, during March and April, the demand had decreased because of the restrictions and the lockdown. We observed that as soon as it was possible to move around the city, the demand have increased in almost every city about for electric bikes or electromobility, sharing electromobility systems. Like, for example, in BCMAT, we observe here that the demand have increased during May over the previous demand before the COVID lockdown. In other cities, like in Brussels, Billy Bike, City Bike from New York, or Transport for London, they experimented an increase on the demand for e-bike sharing services. During the ELVITEN demonstration, here we can see the overall picture of the whole duration of the demonstration. We see from April 2018 until May. We see here the large impact of this COVID-19 crisis in March and April. In March, the trips started to decrease, especially in the second half. The first half of March, trips were still going normal, but in April, the decrease was really noticeable, and we can see here the picture that there was a big impact on this period in the overall average number of trips recorded. Here we can see in this table the actual numbers. March, as we can see, even increased the trips from the average of the previous month, the project, from the start of the pilot until February. We have an average of 2,230 trips around. We including a relatively large decrease in number of trips during the winter time and Christmas holidays. In March, because of the second half was a very good month in trips, the average, so the total number of trips was very similar, was even higher than the previous average. But in April, we see that the decrease is really noticeable. And then in the 2 following months, we see that the number of trips increased even first in May, more than 800 trips than the previous month to the lockdown. And in June, this number was even increasing again. So and we can see here in the next slide the difference compared to previous month. This is the increase or decrease compared to the previous month. So we can see here in May the huge increase in number of trips, saying as in March and April the decrease was really important. So we have here we can see very clearly the contrast from the large decrease in number of trips to the huge increase in number of trips as soon as the restriction was were eased and were lifted. Sorry, and during March we observed also how the number of trips were decreased by week. So the first half of March there was still a large number, a high number of trips, and in the second and in the third and fourth week of March, the trips were decreased substantially. So we could observe exactly week by week how was the situation going. This we were observing at the time to see what was going to happen. It was a good opportunity that the ELVITEN demonstrations were being carried during this period, because this allowed to observe closely and almost in real time what was happening. Again, we can see here the graph that we were explaining before. The number of trips per week. We can see here more closely how this period. What was the behavior and the situation during this period from March until beginning of May? We can see here until June the huge increase in the number of trips that we experimented in May and June, compared even to the months previous to the lockdown. The conclusions that we infer from this data, and also taking in consideration what we have seen also in e-bike sharing schemes from other cities, from Madrid, from London, from Brussels, is that there may be a higher demand on e-bikes and ELVs because of some possible reasons. First is because a fear of contagion in public transport. Individual transport like e-bikes are make easier to maintain social distance that in closed public transport, like in the underground, metro, tramway, etc. These individual vehicles are easier to clean and for users to make sure that that there is no contagion from previous users. And also because of the data observed in the ELVITEN shows that the LLVs perform very well in urban traffic, and they offer a very good alternative to normal public transport, like bus or metro. They are easy to operate. Their batteries provide enough range for the normal urban trips. They're inexpensive. They do not have any fuel consumption, and so they make a very good alternative. And the advantage of much reduced risk of contagion and to be in contact with other transport users, like it will happen in the urban transport. So this is the reason we think that this kind of vehicles are increasing their demand all over the world in major cities, and we will see in the next month. But it's possible that this demand is going even to increase, or at least is going to maintain a higher demand previous to the COVID-19. Well, thank you for your attention, and this is what we have observed during the ELVITEN project.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Now we will have a free presentation from 3 cities of ELVITEN project, and we'll start with Rome. Silvia, do you present?
Hi, hello everyone.
Hello, good
Yes,
morning.
I'm ready. Yes.
Okay, so now I give you the floor. Okay.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm Silvia Andreussi, project manager of the City of Rome 9 District Eur for ELVITEN. And we will see in the pilot of Rome which are the differences and the impact between before and after the COVID-19 health emergency situations. Okay, our objectives during this webinar are to show how the mobility demand and the usual modes of transport in the period of crisis were managed in Rome. In Rome, the habits of users have been profoundly changed by the COVID-19, and we collected, thanks to S3T, also mobility data, and we will show and we will report some differences during, before, and after the lockdown. So it is evident that with the use of electric light vehicles such as the L1EA, the e-bikes used in Rome thanks to ELVITEN project, there were for citizens less health risks compared to the use of the LPT, the local public transport, or other collective means of transport. So this kind of vehicles and this kind of mobility, electric mobility, were very highlighted by the local administration in Rome and also in Italy. And the electric vehicles played a very important role in also for the impact on the public and the conscience of the public that were not informed or didn't use this kind of vehicles. So this is basically the dashboard we use in all the pilot cities. This is for Rome, and this is the situation before the lockdown. In Italy, the lockdown was for the north of Italy in the 1st of March, and in Rome, basically around the 3rd week of March. So we had in this situation, we had like 5,900 trips, and they were like stuck in the following months, April and May, the beginning of May. And so during the month of April, we had a dramatic stop on ELV's usage, just because there were only motivations of transport, like health or work reasons, and not leisure. So the city traffic in Rome basically stopped. And also public transport was mainly avoided, and people moved in their neighborhood. So there were also smart working. Not so many people moved for work, but some of them moved close to their homes for work or health reasons, and they were encouraged to use bicycles thanks to the low level of pollution and low risk for health. For our usage schemes, we use during the ELVITEN pilot in Rome. The only one we mainly use during and before lockdown was and after lockdown was home to office. And the one we didn't have during lockdown was a home office to needs and leisure. The only one which stayed was the usage scheme home to general needs, or home to all needs. So we had obviously a less number of trips due to the legislation in Italy and in Rome. In Rome, we had restriction around neighborhoods, so it was very difficult to use ELVs, this kind of ELVs we use in ELVITEN. For the LPT, local public transport, the city of Rome, as in Italy, used the social distancing on buses and metro and tram and other local public transport tools. And this obviously hit the managing of the services by the LPT agencies, and there was more need of course, tools of transport because of the social distancing. Because also for the trains, still we have in Italy half of the spots, half of the passengers right now. We had analyzed also the ATAC Public Transport Agency of Rome analysis for the schools reopening in apocalyptic scenarios, and we see here the relation between the load capacity of public transport in Rome and the need to maintain the safety distancing, for which in Italy is 1 meter, for instance in Germany is 1.5 meters, and this could be really difficult issue for the reopening of school, which is predicted in like 2 weeks from now. So we will see in the conclusions what we can present for the city of Rome. Regarding the mobility response to COVID-19, we obviously tried as an administration and political part, tried to purchase new buses, sanitizing systems, increase new mobility infrastructures such as the cycling paths, bike lanes, bike stations, and so on. So in the last 3 months, a lot of road works were made in the city of Rome, especially for the bicycles. So for normal bicycles or electric bicycles. And of course, we have also incentives for buying bicycles or electric vehicles, which are very important. So a discount for the citizens which want to use electric mobility is very, very important also in this moment. As Francisco from S3T said, individual mobility is of course safer than collective mobility. So the choice is between individual mobility and with the ICE cars, for instance, and individual sustainable mobility with, for instance, L1EA or EPAC or electric scooters and so on. So it is important to analyze this kind of vehicles and mobility in a huge city like Rome or other cities in Italy or Europe. So which kind of vehicles, electric vehicles, could be the more the safer one and the more adaptable for the infrastructure presence in the city. So as I said before, it could be important to buy more buses and more means of public transports also after the lockdown, also because this is a situation in continued variation, and also promoting company bikes sharing, as we did in ELVITEN pilot until the end of May, could be very easy and very smart for local mobility, also through adequate incentives, because we had like 12 companies, public and private, for 60 vehicles, a fleet of 60 vehicles, and we made like 7,500 trips in 10 months during the last year. So it was a test that could be applied also to other follower cities or other follower companies in Rome, outside Rome, and so on. So this could be an experience in Rome and also in the other 5 pilot cities in ELVITEN. So at the end of May, we had the end of the pilot, and basically we have done also in the month of June like 800 trips. And we see from S3T data that the trips decreased in April, as Francisco said, and they increased at the end of lockdown in May, and they were more than the one in March before lockdown. So it is an important parameter to see. So this is the evolution, the impact on the trips in the month of March. So we see during lockdown there were basically low number of trips, like 100, 200 trips in Rome. And it is important also to see the density at map, because there is a high density of trips during also during the pilot, near the 9 district offices, near the local police offices, because we had a cluster of vehicles there, a small fleet there, and also in Via Laurentina and Via Cristoforo Colombo and our district, in which a lot of companies were experimenting, were users in ELVITEN. We had density of trips of pass about this. So for the conclusions, the pilot in Rome was a successful test for the municipalities, and we implied a model of a long-term sharing scheme, mainly for some entities, for some bodies, short-term sharing scheme. And this confirmed after the lockdown that the e-bikes turned to be a very valid alternative to ICE vehicles, and a very valid alternative also to LPT, local public transport, which is less safe means of transport, of course, not individual, but collective. So the project should represent, for now, a model for new current proposals by the City of Rome and maybe other local administration to promote sustainable mobility with a low-cost option. Of course, you recharge the vehicles and you don't spend money, and in a faster way. So no parking, no traffic, better health, risk transport. Also in a emergency situation like COVID-19, is or was. So ELVs could represent a source of sustainable urban mobility especially in large cities, also in small cities. In large cities, of course, it is more difficult. This is especially if there are incentives, or this is especially the public administration could invest in this. For instance, in purchasing bikes or electric scooters or so on. So right now, we hope this means of transport could increase, and it is happening, we think. So this is the current situation in Rome relating to the ELVITEN pilot in COVID-19 era. So thanks for all, and if you have any questions at the end, we are available.
Thank you very much, Silvia. And now we have the experience of Trikala.
Yes, hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, classic first question. So let me share my screen.
I cannot hear you. You have some trouble with the screen?
Silvia, I suggest to start with Barry,
Yeah.
and then to let George to solve his technical problems.
Okay. So Alessandro, you're presenting for Barry?
Yes. Yes. Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Sorry. Can you see? Sorry? Can you see my screen?
No.
No.
Okay.
Before we have seen the screen.
Can you try again to give me the presentation?
You are already available to share the screen in this moment. I can check again. Okay, try now. Okay.
Okay, now can you see?
Yes.
Okay, can you see now my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, hi, good morning to everybody. I'm Alessandro Rinaldi from Polytechnic University of Bari. Poliba is the partner that is supporting and leading the pilot test of Bari. And this presentation reports the user's experience in the ELVITEN project before, during, and after the lockdown due to the COVID-19, in order to show how the experience of the users changed due to the COVID, and how the ELVITEN project and above all the electric light vehicle can be an important alternative to the traditional means of transport in a period, such a period of crisis. So let's start with the table of content of this presentation. I will talk in particular to with the pilot test of Bari. I will report the status, so the analysis of the trips before the lockdown. So I will talk then about the issues related to the COVID-19. I will talk also with the mitigation activities that Poliba planned in order to increase the number of trips due to the pandemic situation. And also I will report the status of the pilot test during and post lockdown until the end of the demonstration. So in order to have a briefly summary of the pilot test of Bari, in Bari we had 75 e-bikes, L1EA category, and regarding the usage scheme of this vehicle, 75 e-bikes were used. 65 e-bikes were used for as a long-term sharing scheme, and in particular we assigned these vehicles to several private and public companies that use the vehicle for home to work trips, and from home to the workplace, university, leisure place, and return. So the type of users were public employee, professors, research students, and 10 e-bikes were used for short-term sharing scheme for the citizens, and so they used the vehicles from the e-hub to leisure place and return. These are the involved local companies that use the bikes, and also which are this table reports also the number of e-bikes that were assigned to each of these companies. The local company involved were the Polytechnic University of Bari, the Municipality of Bari, the Apulian Aqueduct, the Municipality of Rutigliano. And each of these company provided private parking spaces and charging point, and also they took care of the management, the maintenance, and also the insurance aspect of the bikes. The bikes were assigned to selected employees in a sort of a sharing scheme among the employees and the professors. And in particular, they picked the vehicle from the private company parking, and at the end of driving session, they left the vehicle to the private parking space. And each involved companies provided the insurance of the vehicle. And this is the reason that why, because the starting data of the pilot test was different and was related to the insurance finalization of the agreement of the vehicle for each company. And these were the several parking spaces that the several companies provided for to store the bikes. And the last picture report shows also the e-hub that was used for the short-term sharing scheme for the citizens in order to use and store the bikes then in a sure pace. So this figure reports the status of the pilot test from the beginning of the demonstration until the pre-lockdown that was in the first week of March. And in particular, these graphs show all the trips per weekly and also the cumulative the trips in the pilot test of Bari. In particular, in the green line report the trips per week, and in the blue there is the cumulative trips in Bari. So we can see that from the beginning of the demonstration, so in June, at the end of June, we can see that during the summer and also in the autumn season, there is a good number of trips made by the users. And in the winter season, there is also, due to the weather condition not optimal for using the bikes, there is a decrease of number of trips. But then, starting from March, unexpected and unpredictable problem caused a lockdown in Europe and also in Italy. This is the virus COVID-19. Then, due to the pandemic situation, several limitation was imposed, and containment measures were imposed. Personal mobility in Italy was severely restricted, and so many public offices, private companies, and shops were closed. So due to these several restrictions, the number of trips was strongly reduced. In fact, we can see that starting from March, there is a significant decrease of number of trips, as also reported by Francisco. And in particular, we can see in Italy there was several decrees that were established from the Italian government in order to suspend the several activities in Italy. And in particular, starting from the first decree, all the school and the didactic activities in Italy, and also the university were suspended or closed. So most of the professors and the students that took in rent the bikes were obliged to stay at home, and so only few trips have been registered. So then with the other decree, there is also the suspension of many activities, the suspension of offices, and also all the public offices and authorities in Puglia region were closed. by the Italian government in order to limit the spread of the virus. And only the smart working is imposed for the possible work. And users have to use safety protective devices and other sanitation measures in order to limit the spread of the virus. And strictly restrictions were defined, and the population is forced to stay at home. And so, due to the dramatic situation, also the public spaces, tourist attraction, bar, restaurants, cinemas were closed. And then also the industrial and commercial activities were closed in order to limit the virus contagion. And due to this restriction imposed, the COVID-19 affected negatively the number of trips in Bari. And in particular in March, or in the months of March and April, only few trips were registered. And as a mitigation actives, above all, for after the lockdown, Poliba, so we planned to, and we decided also to shift and to change the planned usage scheme, including and involving more delivery companies like a bar, pizza and restaurant that can use the bikes in order to give the food to the home of the citizens. And then we also promote the use of the bikes in substitution of the public transport means that since the public transport is seems it means with more contagion for the citizens, and so the users is forced to look for new alternatives for daily commuting or usual transport, and so the sharing vehicles such as the electric vehicle can be an alternative solution in order to use vehicles alone and have less fear of contagions. So during and post the lockdown, we can see that there is a significant increase of the number of trips registered in Bari. In fact, we can see that before the lockdown, we have about 300 trips. And then during the lockdown in March and April, we have only few trips registered. But after the lockdown in May and in June, we have a significant increase of the number of trips, as we can see in this figure and also in the table, in the number of trips traveled reported in the table. And so the usage rate improved considerably due to the mitigation activities that we propose and that we put in place. And so in particular, so after this significant decrease due to lockdown, a higher demand of LV is observed after the lockdown. And many users asked to continue using the bikes, as the bikes are considered the best means to maintain social distance, and there's also a useful alternative to cars and the public transport means. And in addition, the planned usage scheme were the most successful for the pilot test. In particular, the usage scheme related to the commuters, so the people that can use the ELV for the homework travel can continue to use the bike. And also the delivery companies, we registered an increasing number of the trips traveled by the delivery companies, as they can use the bikes in order to deliver the several food or package to the home or to the shops. So at the end of the demonstration, at the end of June, we have a significant number of trips until the end of the demonstration. So as I said before, there is a significant increase of the LV usage that allowed us to reach about 7,000 trips in Bari. So in conclusion, the current situation due to the COVID exposes the mobility sector to the real risk of significant increasing and sustainable use of private mobility. And in this situation, the LV market and also the pilot test of Bari show all the benefits in terms of environmental and noise pollution reduction. We should also notice that the current situation is that also from the economic point of view, the cost of the electric vehicle now is lower, and they are also similar to the traditional vehicle. And in addition, also the maintenance and the operation cost of the electric vehicle are lower than the traditional vehicles. So the moment there are several advantages of to use the electric vehicle. And the pilot tests show as the electric vehicle can be an alternative to public transport and private commuting. As we have confirmed, as we have justified in the good number of trips that we had after the lockdown of the COVID-19. So that's all. Thanks for your attention. I don't know if there are some questions.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. At the end, we had the time slot for questions. And now we can try again with the Trikala.
Yes.
Okay.
Hope it works this time.
Okay, we can see.
Working.
Yes. Okay.
Great. Okay, so everybody again. My name is Joshua Getas. I work at the Trikala SA, municipal company in Trikala. So let's talk about the impact of COVID-19 in my city. So initially, the situation in Trikala was that we had three kinds of vehicles. We had three-wheelers for long-term sharing by delivery companies, either food companies or small parcel companies. We had 5 four-wheeler for short term. These were mainly for the citizens or tourists. And we had 18 e-bikes for short-term sharing as well. The registration process, I mentioned this because it's important for later, took place in the center of the city where we have the municipal info point. And this was accomplished by a human operator where he took data from the customer and he enrolled him in the program. The long-term sharing was, the registration was done at our offices here at Trikala, which is in the wider area in the city surrounding. So when the situation with the coronavirus started to spread in the whole globe, in Trikala and in Greece, the lockdown was applied in the middle of March. And that meant that all public gatherings were suspended. There was a general curfew. Only crucial movements were permitted. like visit the doctor's, pharmacy, of course, shopping, but all these were very strict, and you had to declare them through an SMS message. People were not allowed to drive more than 2 at a time. Everything was closed, as you know, in most of your cities. The buses had cut down their routes. They were very limited routes with no more than 50% capacity at the time. So everything was more or less put to a halt. So the immediate impact was that the registrations stopped, as the info point in the city center was closed along with everything else. The trickle offices remained operational, but only with the core staff. So basically, it was closed to the outside as well. And also, it was the period where people had all this initial fear of going out, at least at first. So you could see that everything in our city was kind of empty and dropped. So only the food delivery companies and the parcels as well continued to make trips with the ELVITEN vehicles. Because these were the long-term sharing, and also this happened to be a service that was allowed to continue during the lockdown. You have seen more or less the numbers from the other presentations as well. As with all cities, of course, our trips during this period took a big plunge, and it was a period with the less trips more than any previous month. However, as gradually the strict measures after April started to be lifted, and then people were under certain rules again allowed to circulate and to go out again, and in conjunction that there is the weather improvement here in Greece generally, and in particular because Trikala is a very flat city, and the bicycle is the most popular means of traveling here, car as well, but the bicycle is almost number one for internal movements within the city. The buses mainly serve the areas outside the city, but regarding inside, the bicycles are the most common one. So we see that trips started improving and surpassing even the previous month. So this was due to all what I mentioned, but also, of course, due to the fact that people were tired of the lockdown and wanted to continue to their old life. And so, as I mentioned, the short-term sharing stopped, and the three-wheelers continued on their long sharing. So, in order to have trips with our other vehicles, we started giving them on long term as well. And the electric bikes were given early on to the municipal e-bikes to the municipal police and to other municipal employees, and a few four-wheelers as well. And gradually, after the first 6 measures were lifted, and we returned to the office, and everything started being functional again, with the proper precautions always, we started giving also long-term e-bikes to citizens. And in this period, after the lockdown, it was obvious that people really liked this new way. They were very positive about the e-bike, especially as I mentioned, because almost everyone has a bike in Trikala. So this was something a lot of people tried for the first time, also after the lockdown, and they were very happy with it. And the three-wheelers as well, because after the lockdown, a lot of companies started delivery services that they didn't have before the lockdown. So because of the lockdown, they couldn't operate as proper restaurants, but a lot of them added delivery. And they were all very interested in having the electric three-wheelers. And we had a lot of requests, and many of these new restaurants that added the delivery services were left outside, let's say, of our list because the project ended this summer. So also the municipality's experience was very positive with all the bikes and the municipal police. They were very sad to let them go when our project ended. And it was something that kept, during the lockdown, the municipal police kept doing their job. So it was something that people noticed the bike, and this was obvious after the lockdown when they started asking citizens who wanted to use them as well. So generally, we saw this welcome change to electromobility by citizens. And also, as in the past months, I don't know exactly, we have the state also offers discount initiatives. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 40% for electric bikes and 20% for electric scooters. So people now are even more inclined to get electric bikes as well. And especially here in Trikala, they have a first-hand experience through the ELVITEN project. And I know personally like two people who immediately after the pilot ended, they went and bought their own e-bike. So as mentioned, needs change, things move on, and with COVID now in our lives and electromobility also, and as a bicycle city that we are proud to be, we see all this big shift to electromobility as well. Thank you. Whatever questions will be answered later, I imagine.
Okay, thank you very much. And now the presentation of the technical partner T-Bridge. Elena, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Silvia.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. I'm Elena Cosso from T-Bridge, and I'm going to present to you the result deriving from the report Recommendation for Planning Authorities emerged after COVID-19. The full report was released at the beginning of August, and it was available for download on the ELVITEN project website. The presentation of today include the objective of our study, the outcomes deriving from the analysis of the current mobility behavior, the recommendations emerged from this analysis, and finally some keywords to keep to react in the best way to COVID-19 in the field of mobility. The objective of this work
is to offer to planning authorities some recommendations related to light electric mobility and to new mobility model. The recommendations arise from the integration of the experiences of the pilot cities of the ELVITEN project with the analysis of the data and trend that occurred at global and European level in consequence of the COVID-19. According to experts, the crisis linked to COVID is likely to have permanent effects on existing urban mobility systems, and this is true both in the medium term, with the need to adapt to the safety requirement defined for the post-lockdown phase, and in the long term, when we will have to verify the real impact of the crisis on the behavior of the citizen. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed already people's transport behavior in dramatic ways. Evidence from previous crises shows that in the immediate consequence of a crisis event, transport behavior change because people reassess the cost and benefits of different transport modes. Decision-making are partly driven by people's perceptions of risk, regardless of whether such perceptions are well-founded or not. As lockdowns are lifted, policy are crucial in determining whether mobility change generated by COVID-19 are positive or negative, in terms of their impact on energy use, safety, and long-term environmental and health outcomes. The restrictions put in place to limit the diffusion and impact of COVID-19 have had a widespread impact on people's lives. One of the biggest impacts has been the reduction in passenger transport demand due to a combination of government lockdowns and fears of contracting and spreading the virus. In the post-lockdown phase, the car is back to growth. Public transport is struggling to offer spaced services. And there seems to be an increase in walking, cycling, and in micromobility. In this situation, a major challenge for local authorities is to avoid congestion by providing users with a choice of safe alternatives for their journeys. The suggested recommendations aim to help planning authorities to propose a new urban normality based on the criteria of enhance safety, meet user needs, adopt new regulation policies, create partnership with private operators, improve the usage of technological tools, and promote sustainability. Now I'm going to analyze in detail each of these criteria, explaining the important aspects on which planning authorities should focus on. The first criterion to take into account is safety. Both intrinsic and perceived safety must be taken into account because both of them are fundamental driver for the redesign of the new service offering. Light electric vehicles, especially the two-wheeler, such as bicycle, moped, and scooters, are considered by people a safe means of transport because they are individual means of transport that allow to maintain the social distancing. Sharing and rental services can be an alternative to decline demand for public transport and an ally of cities to limit congestions. These services must not only be understood as compliance with all the regulations that came into force following the emergency, but must also include all those measures that can be further appreciated by the customer as a means to provide reassurance and enforce people's feeling of safety. In the near future, if a way to reassure citizens about the safety of light electric vehicles and of rental and sharing services is found, there will be a significant return for the cities. The second criterion that I would like to analyze are user habits. Citizens, as before, are increasingly adapting their daily behavior, trying to avoid crowded places. For example, home working has increased, many holiday bookings have been cancelled, and the accessibility to different services has changed. While some of these, such as the commute to work, is likely to return to normal when countries lift their restrictions, there are certain urban mobility habits that will remain for a longer duration. People have a new focus on the home as a place of stability and safety in the current deeply uncertain economic landscape. The local neighborhood become people focus for essential shopping, as the local food shops not only avoid contact with crowds at the supermarkets, but also offer shorter queues to get inside. Now that different travel habits have been tried and found acceptable, we expect a significant number of people to continue their local trips by foot, cycle, and moped, rather than public transport. In this context, where their local dimension is favored, that electric vehicles respond perfectly to the new needs of the citizen. The third criterion are regulation policies. They are required to orientate the behaviors of the different user group to facilitate the planning of services. For example, new traffic and parking regulation should take into account the new flows of people born as a consequence of new timetable adopted in public school and in working companies. Support policies are needed to promote sustainable behavior. At a time when people will feel vulnerable, policies that increase confidence in the safety of sustainable transport options are particularly important. Cities can take a central role in determining their future and setting the policies and legal framework for new operators entering into the electric and electric share mobility market in order to favor their success both from a financial and operational point of view. Regulators should keep in mind the following aspects. Mobility is an interconnected system, so regulators should adopt a system-wide perspective while operating within the limits of their legal authority and political realities. Secondly, it is also important to exploit the legislative capacity to influence user habits in the long term in a virtuous way. The policies adopted to face a crisis may subsequently become the normality, encouraging the adoption of new forms of mobility that will remain in the future. The fourth criterion is partnership with private operators. That is a cooperation between the parts which have objectives and outputs in common. Until today, many major mobility providers did not communicate directly with cities and public transport agencies, or did so in a minimalistic approach. The challenge is now to bridge the gap, take lessons learned, and coordinate data specifications, standardization, and legislation in an open, transparent way, so both the public and the private sectors can work towards shared outcomes and goals. Some benefit deriving from the partnership are, for example, the improvement of public service efficiency. In fact, partnering with experts accelerate the modernization of public administrations, and a broader economic development. In fact, private companies can make a significant investment in public infrastructure or services, providing a benefit for the entire community. To encourage the use of rental and sharing services of light electric vehicles in all their possibility, for instance, for tourists, commuters, etc., it is essential to create partnership between service provider and planning authorities. The fifth criterion is the adoption of technological tools. Through the widespread use of fleet monitoring tool data applications and real-time data collection and analysis, operators can monitor the trend of user trips and so can collect useful information to track the status of the vehicles and to plan mobility. There are also apps that incentive virtuous behaviors of users, giving them some benefits in terms of discount or voucher. Other apps are service information applications, which, for example, gave useful information about the advantages of using light electric vehicles, about the availability of parking or availability of recharging stations. Finally, there are also apps for booking vehicles, car parks, and charging station, and often in this app is enabled the payment. All these tools already exist before the emergency caused by COVID-19, but as the situation evolves, they become more and more fundamental for the real-time control of information and to guarantee access to different types of services, eliminating human interactions and allowing to respect the rule of social distancing. The sixth criterion is the sustainability of mobility. Post-COVID restart is a great opportunity for sustainable development. Social distancing, which is fundamental to contain contagion, has given rise to critical issues in all major cities. The crowding of public transport is no longer sustainable, and two fundamental aspects need to be balanced. On one end, the need to avoid the crowds, and at the same time, on the other end, the need to avoid the increasing use of private vehicles causing traffic and pollution. The lockdown showed that all over the world it is possible to strongly reduce CO2 emissions. This was due to several factors, of course, but one of them was the reduced urban traffic. In this direction, the adoption of light electric vehicles could help in decentralizing emissions and in reducing environmental and noise pollutions. So it's a good time to push for soft mobility and sustainable type of transport, finding ways to encourage them. Many cities all over the world have exploited the COVID-19 emergency to encourage sustainable behaviors. For example, many kilometers of bike lanes have been built and low emission zones have been established. To conclude, I'm going to share with you 3 keywords that summarize how public authorities should react to COVID pandemic. The first is flexibility. Administrations will have to make their planning tools increasingly dynamic because of the speed at which the situation evolves. They will have to focus on increasing adaptive capacity, trying to better integrate, refocus, and in some cases diversify their offer. The need to adapt to a progressive change in safety rule require both administration and service providers to equip themselves with regulatory and economic instruments to ensure a faster reaction time. The second keyword is integration. The challenge concerns the need to involve a plurality of actors to develop an integrated and efficient offer. Finally, rationality. The current situation exposes the mobility sector to the real risk of exponentially increasing and therefore unsustainable use of private mobility. Public authorities are called to redesign urban space to facilitate an efficient diversification of the mobility offer. It would be appropriate to design infrastructures suitable for the coexistence of different transport modes and flow types, but also safe and intelligent interchange nodes. We are entering a smart mobility era, and COVID-19 has certainly speeded up this process. Thank you for your attention. That's all.
Thank you very much, Elena. And now I think that we can open the session of questions from participants. If you have something to ask to the ELVITEN partners. You can use the chat if you prefer, as you want. Anna, I don't know if you as a coordinator want to add something to these presentations or...
Yes, hello. I want to thank you all for your presentations. I hope to give an overview of what we're doing and what is the focus of ELVITEN project. Okay, so I see a question from Heinemann Torben.
Hello, shall I explain my question?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Torben Heinemann. I'm coming from the city of Leipzig in Germany, and was attending the meeting. We have also an intense discussion, what is smart mobility for the future? And I understand from what I heard, and maybe understand it wrongly, that there's a big promotion that smart mobility means electric mobility and individualized mobility. So electric cars and vehicles and smart vehicles are small vehicles. I'm not really sure if there is a solution for the future for sustainable mobility in cities, especially in big cities. So I was just wondering if I got the wrong impression from the analysis of the effects of Corona.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if if you need in the project maybe a small turn or twist in making public transport also part of the smart mobility goal. Maybe I missed that, but that's why I'm asking for clarification.
Okay, the outcomes from the analysis so far in 6 cities shows that in terms of the COVID era, that people are more than before willing to use these alternative modes of transportation, meaning that they don't want to use the public transport due to more people, due to the limitations and the social distancing. So the analysis showed us that these small vehicles, and in combination with the technological tools that we offered for the easy booking, easy parking, the incentives, the details about their trips, can boost them to use these vehicles more frequently, and that will lead to a more sustainable environment, because all these vehicles are electric, are not causing pollution, noise, and this can lead to more sustainable ways of transportation.
My worry is, or my point is, that only trips replacing electric vehicles, replacing conventional motorized cars, will have an environmentally friendly effect. If individualized mobility will replace the public transport trips, that's not sustainable. That's not possible in urban centers to have this as a strategic goal, because you need much more space instead of somebody using public transport. You need additional parking capacity instead of somebody just getting off at a tram stop, bus stop, or here local train stop, station. So this is not the smart mobility in my understanding.
Yes,
only
but
to replace car trips.
Yes, but these vehicles can also replace conventional private vehicles. This is the point, because it can be also an individual mobility. Also, states give more incentives to buy such kind of vehicles, not only to share them, but there are also incentives nowadays to buy them. So the replacement also of conventional vehicles is a very important point, and I agree with you about this.
Thank you.
Andrew, would you like to say something? I see you're writing in the chat.
No, I was more or less just saying to Torben Heinemann and also the people who are not in ELVITEN, I'm one of the partners, by the way. Yeah, the goal of ELVITEN was always to reduce car travel and not to replace public transport or walking or cycling. Of course, during the COVID situation, a lot of people were for a while not happy to use public transport, or in many cities, public transport was severely reduced. So they had to look for an alternative. So I think what we did to sort of bring a middle way between both points of view is that we electric vehicles provided a temporary solution here, but in the long term, I agree we shouldn't be looking at replacing public transport, but it can provide a complementary solution, and maybe something we didn't cover in ELVITEN because we covered 6 cities. Maybe some of the future of electric vehicles is in less dense areas, not in cities, but in more suburban or rural places which don't have a comprehensive public transport network, and where people need electric vehicles for last mile solution. So this is another use case that I think is very promising, but it wasn't part of this project.
Yes, okay, I see your last comment. Yes, of course, you're totally right. That's why we said that we need to cooperate also. We need a very dense cooperation between the planning authorities, the service providers, and the regulators, because most of European cities are not ready for this, for the wide adoption of light vehicles fleets in the roads. So we need changes in the regulations, in the infrastructure, in the capabilities of the vehicles, and that's also one of the scope of ELVITEN project. That we're going also to provide recommendation for all these things upon the end, which will be on November this year, and will be also published and presented during our final event in October. So is there any other question or any comment? Sylvia, would you like to say something? I see that you have a talk at the chat.
Yes, I was seeing also the answer of Heinerman. I will read the article, of course. I've been in Berlin as a means of paragon for this city, Leipzig. In Berlin, as in Berlin is a big city, not as big as Rome, but I noticed the difference, and I noticed that this could be a model for electric mobility, because the mobility there is very functional in public transportation, but I noticed that social distancing is not always possible. So personally, I prefer to rent a bike, a normal bike, and I used it for 6 days in bike lanes, and it was perfect. I noticed there were a lot of ELVs for sharing, e-scooters, e-bikes from Uber, mopes, and so on, and people use them, and there were not so many cars and not so much pollution. So there were a lot of people in bike lanes. I noticed this. And not so many people in some hours, in some range of hours in public transport, like underground or trains. But in some hours, there were a lot of people So this is what I noticed comparing to Rome, and I think in Germany this could be a model following Berlin, and also in Italy and other countries. Wanted to say this. So I don't know if Heinemann, Torben want to say something.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thanks.
Berlin is quite unique in Germany. First of all, it's the biggest city, but also they try a lot of different attempts. So they were basically the only four riding city for pop-up bike lanes. And they put quite a pressure with them being a role model for the other cities, and smaller cities could not follow that. I'm not really sure about the source that the Guardian, the article that I sent to you, used actually for their findings. But my point is that we have now the situation, public transport doesn't have a good image. We're working on it, how to build more trust in public transport again for the customers. But there's more people being on the street. More people use individual mobilities. As you said, also the electric mobilities. They have the e-scooters in Berlin, for example. And we notice that there's a higher chance, higher rate of accidents, higher chance to get involved in an accident. So that's not a long-term perspective. And I think we analyzed this already in the discussion. So I think Berlin is a good place to learning. I think they're a part of the ELVITEN project. I think they can give you better information than from me from Leipzig, just being now south of Berlin. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, no. So just now, to inform you about also an ongoing survey that is taking place. So Andrew, please, can you provide more details to the participants? They want to participate?
Yes, hi. So for those of you who are not ELVITEN partners, those who are visiting, we did a public perception survey 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, on attitudes to lighted electric vehicles in the 6 cities where we have demonstrations, and we're doing a follow-up survey at the moment. So in case you are based in one of our 6 cities, it's only for the people in those cities. So those are Bari, Genoa and Rome in Italy, Tricala in Greece, Malaga in Spain and Berlin in Germany. If you are based in one of those, or you have contacts in one of those and can spread the survey, that would be very much appreciated. It's open for another 2 weeks only, and I'll just put the link in the chat right now. It's just a very short thing, and it's aimed at citizens, so it's not just for experts. It's a very short thing that we just want to disseminate widely among networks, but only in those 6 cities, because if you answer from if we get 2 responses from London or Leipzig or somewhere else, then we can't really do that analysis, because we need a critical mass of people in our cities to do it. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Also have in mind that if you're interested, you can be part of our ELVITEN Follower Cities group. As Sylvia mentioned before, or to inform a city that you are working with that we have this possibility. For this, you can contact Sylvia. So if there is no other question or comment, I think we can close. So Sylvia, the floor is yours. If you would like to say something or close the webinar.
No, only if you need more information on the follower cities, or if you want to sign the statement, you can write to me. You have my email address. I've sent the invitation for today from my email, so you can write directly to me. Okay, so I think that we can close. Thank you very much to all for the presentation and for take part to the webinar. And have a nice day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sylvia. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.